So, I'm sure a lot of people, and before I start this, I would like you to do me a favor, and that's ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, share the video, like the video. Also, click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere. You can find me at all your favorite audio and video podcast affiliates that are listed in the description, as well as you can find me at rumble.com, odyssey.com, vmo.com, as well as you can support me over at patreon.com. I have plans for that. I'll let you know in the near future what those are, as well as you can support me over at Cash App and Venmo, and the live chat and super chats are open if you would like to donate. It'd be greatly appreciated. But anyway, on to the topic at hand. Now, as we all know, yesterday news came out that the reason Andrade had been missing from AEW for weeks after debuting on the 6th anniversary October 1st edition of Dynamite is due to the fact that WWE, pretty much WWE, a la TKO, WWE slash TKO, basically, I guess you could say, pulled a fast one on Andrade, depending on how you look at it. Because they basically let Andrade know that, hey, you can't be doing what you just did. You can't show up on the competition's, major television show, their A show, if you will, a week or so after we let you go, or a week or so after we fired you, because of the fact that you have a 90-day non-compete clause. Now, I said in my take on this that I wasn't sure whether or not that was legal, but after watching what JD from NY206 of Off the Script had to say, and others have talked about, yes, the non-compete is legal. The FTC tried to get it abolished, I should say. The FTC tried to get it abolished, and the court said, no, that's not going to happen. It's staying where it is. So yeah, the non-compete clause, whether it's 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, what have you, is definitely still in effect, legally. So what WWE did by putting the kibosh before anything could really take place, for Andrade at AEW, was in their right, and basically easy for me to say, leveling him, or putting the leveling him with a 90-day non-compete, no pay clause as well, due to him, violating what he did, is in their rights as well. Because as a lot of people pointed out, and I just watched an updated video that JD put out this morning, basically, WWE, from his point of view, and others might share the same aspect or same perspective, I should say. From his point of view, WWE saw what Andrade was trying to do and said, nah, that ain't going to work. You want to be gone, you want us to fire you, fine. We'll fire you because of your violations, but we're not going to pay you, and you're not going to be able to compete for 90 days. Initially, what people thought, until at least mid-December, maybe January, New Year's, 2026. You won't be able to compete anywhere else, if you will. Well, I did allude to something during that as well, that it could be longer for Andrade. It could be longer, and basically there was some updates that was thrown out there. In fact, I did record that when a lot of these updates were coming in, but more came in as well. And this was reported by, of all places, Wrestling Observer, and then followed up, I think, by PW Insider, pretty much confirmed, followed up by PW Insider, and by Fightful, both at which, unlike Wrestling Observer, are going to try to find out more information as to see whether or not this is indeed true, and whether or not Andrade, if he felt like it, could fight this in court. But here's the updated situation. It says, and I quote, this is from Fightful Select. It says, and I quote, update. A number of people have indicated to Fightful Select that Andrade has a very quote-unquote good lawyer, but didn't specify, easy for me to say, but didn't specify if he was fighting it, basically. Basically, they're saying that he has a good lawyer, that could potentially, help him take this to court so he could fight it. Basically try to get it thrown out. They go on to say that the 90-day period is often referred to as a non-compete, but is actually more of a notice of contract expiration as talent gets paid. PW Insider reported that Andrade would not be getting paid during that non-compete. The conflicting element is that almost any court situation to fight it would extend past the 90 days. However, that's where things differ from the norm. So basically, you know, if you were to take, let's say the 90 days, non-compete, not getting paid situation to court, normally there's a good chance you'd get that thrown out, and yeah, you would have to serve maybe the 90 days, but the payment part would still, but the non-pay part, I should say, would get thrown out mostly, and you would get paid for those 90 days, or something like that, or maybe all of it gets thrown out and you can work immediately, and so you can get paid, put food on your table. But again, they said that's where things differ from the norm. They say, and I quote, Wrestling Observer, whether you believe them or not, reported that WWE has a clause in their contracts where a person at cause can be extended for a year. Fightful has learned the language of that clause. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute. I thought it was normally a year, normally 90 days, not a year. Well, here's the thing. It's like JD said. Whether you like JD from NY206 or not, Andrade, basically shot himself in the foot, if you will, and WWE, and to an extent TKO, saw what he was doing, or attempting to do, and said, fine, you want out of your contract? Cool, we'll fire you. We'll fire you for the violations. We're not going to pay you for the time, you are gone, basically doing the non-compete. And oh, by the way, because we know what you were trying to do, because we saw what you were attempting to do, because you were trying to get yourself fired, we have cause to basically make that 90 days up to a year. That's essentially what it sounds like here. But again, we'll have to see what the true outcome will be in the long run. But this is what, Fightful has learned about the language of the clause. Because again, it says, Wrestling Observer reported that WWE has a clause in their contracts where a person at cause can be extended for a year. Fightful has learned the language of that clause. And this is the clause, and I quote. Let me see if I got this right, because I'm not a legal person, I can tell you that. I'm not some legal expert. But it says, okay, here's the clause. It says, Clause B. It says, upon termination of this agreement by promoter for breach of the terms hereof, a wrestler. Okay, let me reread that again. I'm not, legal language mumbo jumbo kind of guy. You know what I'm saying? But it says here, and I quote, this is the clause that Fightful learned the language of. It says, B. Upon termination of this agreement by promoter for breach of the terms hereof, wrestler shall not work, appear, or perform in any capacity for any professional wrestling, sports entertainment, mixed martial arts, and or ultimate fighting organization, promotion, or entity not owned or controlled by promoter, or any affiliated subsidiary company thereof, in the United States for a period up to 1 year from the date of such expiration or termination, as specified by promoter in the notice of termination provided. However, that if no lesser period is specified by promoter in the notice of termination, such period shall be 1 year. So again, basically what they're saying here, and they actually put these words in caps. It says, again, upon termination of this agreement by promoter, and again they put that word in caps, for breach of the terms hereof, wrestler, and that's another word in caps, shall not work, appear, or perform in any capacity for any professional wrestling, sports entertainment, mixed martial arts, and of or ultimate fighting organization, promotional entity not owned or controlled by promoter, or any affiliated or subsidiary company thereof, in the United States for a period up to 1 year from the date of such expiration or termination, as specified by promoter in the notice of termination provided. However, that if no lesser period is specified by promoter in the notice of termination, such a period shall be, shall be 1 year. Had a little burp there, I do apologize. He'll be up to 1 year. So in other words, what they're saying is that, so in other words, from what I'm understanding as best as I can, is the 90 days still might be, the only thing he has to serve, because if that's in the contract, that hey, if we terminate you, it's only 90 days, or if you're an NXT Evolve talent, it's 30 days, then, and then okay, fine, no problem, fine, no problem, you can go after 90 days, and around mid-December, beginning of January, work for other promotions like AEW, Crash, you name it. But apparently that may not be the case for Andrade because, as a lot of people are pointing out, he's pretty much brought this upon himself. Now they do say that there is also a follow-up that says I2.4 is in no circumstance whatsoever shall either party to this agreement be liable to the other party for any, punitive or exemplary damages, and of all such damages either arising out of breach of this agreement or otherwise are expressly waived. And they basically say if fought in court, this would almost certainly be thrown out. So in other words, and that's Fightful that says that last part, if fought in court, this would be most certainly thrown out. So basically what they're saying here is that Andrade basically, and I do agree that this is kind of stupid for any corporation to put in, whether your own deal, like WWE used to be, under the McMahons, or now they're under TKO. This is a screwed up deal. This is a screwed up deal to where it's like, well, wait a minute. If this person is terminated or the contract is expired, or they're released, well, the contract expiration is not a problem because they're more willing to let that happen and say, hey, let your contract run out, do what you got to do for us, and then let's say this Friday is your last, match on SmackDown, or let's say somebody's last match in WWE is tonight on SmackDown. Then if they want to go to AEW and show up for Wrestle Dream 24 hours later, as a mystery opponent or as a surprise debut helping somebody out, they can do that. That's legal. That's in the clause. But if they're released due to budget cuts, if they are terminated, fired like Andrade, then yeah, they'll be facing 90 days more than likely. But from what it sounds like here, if they decide to try to pull what Andrade did, then they could be looking at more than a year without pay and without competing anywhere. I mean, yeah, there are some loopholes that say, yeah, he can't compete in the United States, because it does say that here. He can't compete here in the United States for a year, if that does happen, but it doesn't specifically say he can't go compete in Mexico, in Puerto Rico, in Japan, in the UK, in Canada, if you will. It doesn't say he can't go anywhere outside of America. He just can't compete in America for 1 year. Now, the 90 days, that's an international thing. So he can't go anywhere internationally for 90 days. But after that, come, the start of next year, he could show up at Wrestle Kingdom, as a surprise entrant in the opening Battle Royal match, and maybe win it to get a future shot at the IWGP World Title. He could show up at Rev Pro, at the first event of the year in 2026, or maybe whatever they do for New Year's. He could show up there. He could show up in CMLL if he wanted to, and be there. He could show up back in Crash and basically, continue to defend the world title if they haven't, stripped it from him. He can do that. He can go, like I said, he can go anywhere. He can go to, I think he's scheduled for World Wrestling Council in Puerto Rico this weekend, or at least he was. He could potentially go there if he has to basically cancel his appearance or his match appearance there this week. This weekend, he could make that up probably within 90 days or at the beginning of next year. He can even go down to Australia and work for things like Riot City Wrestling. After 90 days, it's just that for 1 year, because of what he did, he can't step foot in a wrestling ring in the United States. So that's pretty much the downfall here with Andrade. And again, Andrade thought obviously he could, Obviously, he had this mindset. He had this mindset of, oh, they fired me, I'm terminated. I can go and wrestle wherever I want to now. I can go to AEW and be there. Yeah, yeah, that's not really a possibility. And for them to say he has a good lawyer, I think JD had the right thing in laughing about that. If Andrade's lawyer is so good, then why did he not overlook, or not overlook, but why didn't he take a closer look at the agreement, the termination agreement that Andrade probably had to sign and everything, or it was emailed or faxed to him or whatever they did to get him to sign it? Why didn't he take a closer look at that and go like, oh wait, Andrade, before you have us call Tony, look at this, and have Andrade look at the stipulation of, oh, I can't compete anywhere for 90 days, or I can't compete on any national level, if you will, for 90 days. And if that would have been the case, as a lot of people pointed out, we wouldn't be in this situation. Andrade would not be in this situation, because then he could show up at World's End, a free man, and start his program with Kenny Omega there instead of starting it early on October 1st. But because he didn't look it over, he didn't have his lawyers look it over, and he was in a hurry to go to the competition, try to stick it to WWE, and Tony Khan and his crew obviously not looking it over, and them determined to stick it to WWE, and try to get some notoriety, as some people put it, because that's the only reason they did it. Now they're in a situation, to where basically they got to act like that attack on Kenny Omega, that segment, with Andrade debuting and attacking Kenny Omega, they got to act like that never happened. That never occurred. I don't even know if they have already, but they even have to take that clip down of Andrade attacking Kenny Omega, because that would be in violation of the cease and desist. Now, could Andrade take this to court and have it thrown out? Absolutely. Could Tony Khan help him take it to court? Like JD and others have kind of suggested that, or kind of acknowledged could be a possibility to get it thrown out? Yeah, he could. But at the same time, WWE could take Tony Khan to court. They could take him to court and basically say, you did the one thing you always blamed us for. You contract tampered. You contract tampered when it says right here in the contract, and they'll show him. They'll show him, they'll show the courts. See, it says it right here, when our talent was under a 90-day non-compete. So even if Tony takes it to court and everything, even if he helps Andrade take it to court and try to get it thrown out, WWE could come back and say, look, here's what it says in the contract, and WWE being the bigger entity, TKO being the bigger entity, they can be like, yeah, they have a point here, so we're not going to throw this out, but we are going to make an exception to where he does have to get paid. That would be the only thing that I think would be a victory for Andrade and Tony Khan, that, yeah, Andrade can't be seen until at least maybe World's End, but he'll still get paid. So that would be a winning, I guess you could say a bittersweet victory, in the long run. But again, if they try to take this to court, WWE could just counter them by saying, look, here's what it says. And again, them and TKO, and Endeavor, being the bigger entity, the courts are going to side with them. They're going to side with them. I mean, maybe not, because, Tony could come out, Andrade could come out and say, yeah, well, they let him know about this, after he debuted. So, there's that, fine, so there's that catch. And then the courts could be like, did you? And they would have no choice under oath, but to admit, like, yeah, we kind of did. And then that might be the leverage Andrade and Tony Khan need to, so that the courts say, okay, I'm gonna side with Tony Khan and Andrade. We're gonna throw this out, and he can go back to work. That could happen too. But again, it's very slight, if you will. I'm not saying it wouldn't happen in that manner, but it's a very slight possibility. I'll put it that way. It's a very, very slight possibility that would go in their favor. That would go in their favor, because the courts will ask all kinds of questions. They'll ask all kinds of questions. And one of the questions I'm almost certain they would ask is if Andrade's lawyers, looked over, the termination the termination papers and everything, and even the initial contract he signed in 2024, that states, hey, if you are released for any manner or terminated for any manner, you can't compete for 90 days. That would be one of the questions they're gonna ask. And again, being under oath, the lawyers probably have to admit, or at least try to admit, or try to get sly, or try to be sly about it. Like, oh well, we didn't see that. We didn't notice that fine print and all that. And then maybe somebody on the WWE side, or even the judge, will be like, it's not in fine print. It's right in your face. So yeah, this is a situation to where basically, more than likely, if they were to go the court route and everything, yeah, there's a slight chance the judge will rule in favor of Andrade and Tony Khan, and Andrade could be free to go back to work. There is that possibility, but it's a slight possibility because there's too much evidence that WWE would have, on their side and everything to basically prevent it from happening. Like WWE might agree, hey, we'll pay him. We'll pay him for a year if he has to serve out a year, of non-compete. We'll pay him for a year and everything, but he just can't compete anywhere here in the States, if not internationally. Internationally, I don't think it would be a big deal, but in the States, it would be. It would be a big deal. So, that might be the only thing that would go in their favor, go in Andrade and Tony Khan's favor, is if the judge mostly sides with WWE, but also says, hey, you still got to pay this guy. This guy's got to make a living for the 90 days to a year non-compete here in the States. So that might happen too, and they might even, rule in the favor of, hey, just because he can't compete here 90 days to a year in the States, it doesn't mean he shouldn't be able to make a living outside of it, competing, internationally. And WWE might agree to that clause, like, okay, fine, he can compete outside of the country, just not in it. But again, it's up to what happens. It's up to what happens, and it's a whole mess. It's a whole mess. It's like I said yesterday. It's basically a situation of miscommunicational, I guess you could say, notes, talks, emails, texts, you name it. It's just somebody on all sides, Andrade, Tony Khan, AEW, they fumbled. A lot of people are going to say Andrade and Tony Khan mostly, but on the WWE side, somebody fumbled there. Somebody on the WWE, TKO, Endeavor side fumbled there. Didn't realize, oh, wait a minute, this guy's got non-compete. We got to let him know. And they let him know at the wrong time. And again, there are several situations that can go in their favor. There are a lot of situations that can go in their favor to allow him to compete again on AEW. Like I said, they could bring up the fact that he wasn't, notified about this until after he debuted, and then that could be put in their favor to where, the judge could throw it out and he can compete. But then again, the judge could ask, on behalf of WWE and TKO, did your lawyers, Andrade, and did your lawyers, Tony, read the contract and everything of, his termination, as well as upon his, signing with the company about a year ago or so? And they could probably, in a way, acknowledge that they didn't, and even though the judge might say it's right there, so it's one of those situations to where basically it would not, look good for them and all that. Even if they try to argue, they weren't notified until later on, or until after he debuted. It's just, in my opinion, a situation to where, yeah, they'll have like some kind of moral victory, but that moral victory would be more along the lines of, if he has to be non-competed for a year in the States, that he'll get paid, and he'll still be able to wrestle outside of the United States. So that would be, so that would be good. That would be, I guess you could say bittersweet, that he'd still be able to do what he likes to do, but he'd have to do it outside the country, not within it, but he'd still be getting paid, be still getting paid though, and everything. That might be the moral victory. They might say, hey, just let him serve it out. He didn't, he made a mistake. This is new to him, and da. So it's a situation to where, honestly, I think honestly, it's gonna, you're gonna get. How do I put this in closing? You're gonna get like I said, you're gonna get like a bittersweet moral victory for Andrade, there's a, like I said, there's a good chance it could get thrown out because they could explain, hey, we didn't get this until after he debuted, and they might ask WWE, well, what happened? WWE TKO, what happened? And if WWE and TKO don't give a good answer, yeah, that could favor Andrade and Tony Khan, and Andrade could go back to work. But again, this is WWE TKO we're talking about, and yeah, they might get asked that question, but then they might want the judge to ask, well, why didn't this guy have his lawyers, look over the contract, carefully and notice that the agreement is if we release or terminate, they can't compete for 90 days or show up, compete or show up anywhere competitive-wise, on camera, television-wise, or anything. Why didn't his lawyers, basically look at the contract and notice that clause, or notice that clause and let him know about it, and the same thing with Tony Khan. They could ask Tony Khan, hey, why didn't your lawyers, why didn't your representatives do the research they needed to find out whether or not this guy could show up? Again, it's a situation. It's a situation to where I think it favors more WWE, unfortunately, than Andrade. Despite what people might say, because again, they can, they're the bigger entity, and they can have the courts, ask questions and everything that basically would need, that they would like the answers from. They would like to get answers from Andrade and all that from about why he didn't, remember he had this, or why didn't his representatives look this over, and why Tony Khan's representatives didn't look this over. It's going to favor them more. It's going to favor them more. Again, the silver lining I see for Andrade is he'll still be able to compete, but outside of the states. And more than likely, the judge will be like, yeah, you still got to pay him for up to the 90 days or year. He's not going to compete in state. So those would be the only silver linings. He can go and get himself booked internationally outside the country, but he still gets paid for the 90 days to a year non-compete that he won't be, able to wrestle, be able to wrestle in the states for. So that's the silver lining. But then, because again, there's gonna be a lot of questions asked if they do take it to court, and some of them are going to favor more WWE than Andrade. But again, the silver lining is he'll still be able to compete outside the country and maybe get paid for the 90 days non-compete or 365 days non-compete that he'll be not be able to do, that he will not be able to compete in the states for, if you know what I mean. Now, like I said, there's a good chance he could get it thrown out because they could bring up, hey, we didn't find this out until after he debuted. And, the courts may ask why not, and that might favor them. And if that happens, good. He can go right back to work, and, hey, we get that Kenny Omega Andrade program that obviously they started, on the 6th anniversary show. But we'll see. But let me know what your thoughts are on this updated information. What do you think is the more likely situation for Andrade in the long run, and, in AEW and Tony Khan to an extent? Do you think, in a way, he might get it thrown out in his favor and be able to go back to work? Do you think WWE will basically win, but it'll be a bittersweet victory for Andrade and Tony Khan as well, to where Andrade could still compete, but internationally, but WWE and TKO would still have to pay him for up to 90 days, for up to the 90 days to 365 days non-compete. He wouldn't be able to in the States. Let me know what your thoughts are. Comment down below, and if you have already commented in the live chat and everything, thank you very much. And that's all I'm going to say, guys. And like I said at the beginning, like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel. Also share the video, ring the bell for notifications, like I said. And also click on the links in the description to find my content also outside of YouTube. And also support me over at Patreon, Venmo, Cash App, and at my Fourth Wall and Teespring stores. But guys, let me know what your thoughts are. And until next time, I'm out.